where every small piece of metal carries a massive untold story. And today, we are diving deep into the United States, one dime dated 1977, a coin that almost everyone has seen, almost everyone has spent, and almost no one has ever truly understood. Because this tiny 10-cent coin is not just pocket change, it is a time capsule from an America standing at the edge of economic recovery, cultural transformation, and quiet minting decisions that would shape modern coin collecting for decades. As you hold a 1977 dime in your hand, you are holding the legacy of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a president whose image was placed on the dime not for wealth or power, but for hope, resilience, and the fight against polio. And by 1977, that legacy was already more than 3 decades old, yet still deeply woven into the daily life of millions of Americans. The year 1977 sits in a fascinating place in U.S. history, a post-Vietnam nation, a Cold War economy, inflation, rising confidence, uncertain, and the U.S. Mint working behind the scenes, striking hundreds of millions of dimes to keep commerce moving smoothly while collectors barely noticed what was happening. The 1977 dime was struck in Philadelphia and Denver, both without silver made of copper nickel. Clad composition, a clear signal that the age of precious metal circulation was over, and practicality ruled the day, but inside this practicality lies incredible detail. The torch on the reverse representing liberty, enlightenment, and education flanked by olive and oak branches symbolizing peace and strength. The same design introduced in 1946, yet still powerful, still relevant, and still speaking to the values America wanted to project to the world. In the late 1970s, the obverse portrait of Roosevelt, refined and dignified, reflects a nation, honoring memory rather than monarchy. And when you study the strikes, the mint marks the edge reading, and even the smallest die variations, you begin to realize how much human effort, machine precision, and historical momentum went into something most people never look at. Twice collectors today. Search 1977 dimes for full torch details, crisp bands, and rare mint errors, because this was a year of heavy production, which means quality varies dramatically, making high grade. Examples surprisingly elusive, especially in uncirculated condition, and proof strikes from San Francisco add another layer of depth with mirror finishes, frosted devices, and the quiet elegance of coins never meant for circulation but meant to preserve perfection. The 1977 dime tells the story of inflation-era economics when 10 cents bought far less than it once did, yet still mattered to everyday life. It tells the story of vending machines, gas stations, public transport, and school lunches. It tells the story of a nation transitioning from silver-backed confidence to modern fiat reality. And when you step back and look at this coin, not as spare change but as a historical artifact, you realize it connects presidents, mint workers, collectors, and citizens across generations. This is why the 1977 dime deserves your attention, because hidden inside its small diameter is a massive American story of resilience, adaptation, and continuity. And by the end of this journey, you will never look at a dime the same way again. So stay with Coins Us as we break down the history, the design, the mintage, the errors, the value, and the legacy of the United States. One dime dated 1977. A coin that proves even the smallest denomination can carry the biggest story. Into the story of the 1977 United States dime, we have to slow down and imagine the world. This coin was born into because coins do not exist in isolation. They are products of their time, shaped by politics, economics, technology, and human habits. In 1977, America was adjusting to a new normal. The gold standard was gone. Silver was no longer part of circulating coinage, and inflation had changed how people felt about money. Every transaction, every purchase, every handful of change carried a quiet awareness that the value of a dollar was not what it used to be. And the dime, once a powerful symbol of buying power, had become a workhorse of daily commerce, used constantly, rarely appreciated, yet absolutely essential, and the U.S. Mint understood this reality. which is why production numbers for 1977 were enormous, with hundreds of millions of dimes struck to meet demand, ensuring that cash registers, bank vaults, and pockets across the nation never ran dry. And this massive output is exactly what makes the story so interesting. Because when quantity rises, individuality hides in plain sight, slight differences in strikes die, wear-off center impressions, weak details and subtle errors began to appear, creating a hidden world within an otherwise common coin. And for collectors, this is where the hunt truly begins. Because finding a sharply struck 1977 dime with full torch bands is not as easy as the mintage numbers suggest, especially from the Philadelphia Mint, which did not use a mint mark at the time, leaving many to overlook its origin, while Denver struck its own version marked with a small but important D, carrying its own characteristics and strike quality differences. And then there are the proof dimes struck in San Francisco, not intended for circulation but for collectors and archives coins that showcase what the design was always meant to look like: flawless reflective fields, frosted devices, and precision that reveals every line of Roosevelt's portrait and every branch leaf and flame on the reverse. These proof coins act as a benchmark, allowing us to compare the everyday circulation strikes to the ideal version of the dime. And when you do this comparison, you start to see just how much wear, tear, and compromise happens once a coin enters real-world use, moving through counting machines, registers, wallets, and hands year after year, decade after decade. The 1977 dime also reflects technological changes in minting processes, improved machinery, faster production, and standardized compositions that made coins cheaper to produce and more durable, but also stripped them of intrinsic metal value, shifting their worth entirely to trust and government backing. And this shift changed how people saved, collected, and even emotionally connected to coins. Older generations remembered silver dimes with nostalgia, while younger Americans saw clad dimes as purely functional. And this generational divide is part of the story, because the 1977 dime sits squarely between memory and modernity, between old habits and new realities. And as time passed, many of these dimes disappeared through attrition, melted down in bulk lots lost overseas, or simply worn smooth beyond recognition, making well-preserved examples far more meaningful today than their face value suggests. And when collectors examine these coins under magnification, searching for doubled dies, clipped planchets, misaligned strikes, or unusual textures, they are not just chasing value, they are uncovering moments when the minting process briefly slipped, revealing the human and mechanical side of mass production. And these moments, frozen in metal, transform an ordinary dime into a conversation piece, a teaching tool, and a tangible connection to a specific year in American history. And as we continue this journey, we will explore how grading works, why condition matters so much, how market demand has shifted over time, and why a coin that millions once ignored can now command attention, respect, and in some cases surprising premiums, because the true value of the 1977 dime is not measured in cents, but in the story it carries and the insight it offers into how America moved through the late 1970s, one small transaction at a time. Today, you are about to discover why a small, ordinary-looking 1987 United States dime carries a story far bigger than its size. A story of American change, economic pressure, silent mint decisions, and a year when the nation stood at a crossroads between old industrial power and a fast-approaching digital future. This is not just a coin. This is a witness to history, a 10-cent piece that passed through millions of hands while America worked, spent, saved, worried, and dreamed in 1987. And if you have ever held a dime and thought it was too common to matter, this video will change the way you see every single one forever. Imagine the sound of factory floors still humming across the country, the stock market soaring higher than ever before, families confident in the promise of prosperity, and beneath it all a fragile system that would soon be shaken. The 1987 Dime was born into that world, struck quietly at the Philadelphia and Denver mints with no fanfare, no special announcement, and no idea that the year it carried would soon be remembered for one of the most dramatic financial events in modern American history. Black Monday, this dime circulated before and after that crash. It paid for coffee, newspapers, bus rides, and vending machines as fear and uncertainty rippled through the economy. And yet the design on the coin remained calm and unchanging. Franklin Delano Roosevelt's portrait steady, resolute, a reminder of leadership during crisis chosen decades earlier, but never more symbolic than in a year. Like 1987, Roosevelt was the president who guided America through the Great Depression and World War, and his image on the dime in 1987 spoke silently to a nation facing its own test of confidence. The Roosevelt dime itself had already been part of American life for over 40 years by the time 1987 arrived, introduced in 1946 to honor the late president and his connection to the March of Dimes campaign. The coin symbolized hope, public health, and unity. By 1987, that symbolism was still there, but now layered with modern realities. The metal composition, copper core clad in nickel, reflected the post-silver era, a time when rising metal prices had already changed what money was made of and how people thought about value no longer. Precious metal money was now about trust systems and stability, and the 1987 dime perfectly captures that shift because it looks identical to millions of others. Yet its context is everything. In 1987, America was deep into the Reagan era. The Cold War was slowly thawing, technology was advancing rapidly, personal computers were entering homes, Wall Street was booming, and consumer confidence was high until October when the market collapsed in a single terrifying day, the 1987. Dime crossed counters before and after that moment, making it a physical artifact of optimism and shock. Collectors often overlook this year, because mintages were high and the coin appears common. But common does not mean unimportant. Millions were struck, because millions were needed. The economy demanded constant movement of small change, and every dime tells a micro-story of circulation, wear, and survival. Some were saved in mint condition, tucked away unknowingly. Some were spent into near oblivion, and others picked up subtle errors. Die cracks off center strikes, weak details that today catch the eyes of collectors who know where to look. And as we dive deeper into this 2-hour journey, we will explore how the Philadelphia and Denver mints operated in 1987, how quality control worked, what kinds of errors escaped into circulation, and why certain examples of this dime are worth far more than 10 cents. Today, we will talk about proof versions struck in San Francisco Mirror. Like time capsules meant not for spending, but for preservation, and how those proof dimes contrast sharply with their hard-working circulating counterparts. We will explore grading standards, what separates a worn example from a high mint state coin, and why tiny differences in luster strike and surface can mean the difference between pocket change and collector value. But more than numbers and grades, this is about meaning. The 1987 dime is a symbol of everyday America. It lived in wallets during the final years of the Cold War. It jingled in pockets as technology reshaped work and communication, and it endured quietly while headlines screamed panic and recovery. This coin does not shout its importance, it whispers it. And by the end of this video, you will understand why. Even look. Because history does not only live in museums and textbooks, it lives in your change jar, your pocket, and your hand. And the 1987 United States dime is proof that sometimes the smallest pieces of money carry the biggest stories. So stay with Coins Us, slow down and look closer. Because what you are about to learn will forever change the way you see a dime. The 1987 United States dime. It becomes clear that this coin is not just a product of its year, but a reflection of the systems and people that kept America moving day after day. In 1987, the United States Mint was operating at full efficiency, focused not on celebration or commemoration, but on reliability, consistency, and volume. The Philadelphia Mint, which no longer used a mint mark on Dime struck hundreds of millions of coins intended to flow seamlessly into commerce, while the Denver Mint added its small but meaningful D-Mint mark, producing its own massive output together. These facilities ensured that the dime remained the backbone of everyday transactions: laundromats, parking meters, payphones, school lunches, and public transportation. All depended on coins like this one, and every strike of the press carried the responsibility of trust, because money only works when people believe in it. The Roosevelt portrait designed by John R. Sinek remained unchanged, showing a calm, determined expression that had guided the dime since the aftermath of World War II in 1987. That portrait connected generations. Grandparents remembered Roosevelt as a leader. Parents saw him as history, and children grew up with his face without always knowing his name. Yet the design worked because it was familiar, and familiarity breeds confidence. The reverse torch, flanked by olive and oak branches, continued to symbolize liberty, peace, and strength values that felt especially important in a world still divided by ideology and nuclear tension. While politicians negotiated and economies fluctuated, this dime remained visually steady year after year, reinforcing the idea that some things in America endure no matter what happens on the evening news. Beneath that steady appearance, however, the minting process itself was a complex dance of machinery, human oversight, and raw materials. Copper planchets clad in nickel were fed into presses at incredible speeds. Each blank struck with enormous force. Errors were not supposed to happen, yet they always did, and 1987 is no exception. Some dimes left the press with doubled dies, faint but collectible. Some were struck slightly off-center. Others show die, cracks that resemble tiny lightning bolts frozen in metal. These flaws were not intentional, but they are part of the story because they reveal the human side of mass production, the pressure to meet demand, the limits of technology, and the reality that perfection is rare. Collectors today search rolls and collections hoping to find these overlooked survivors, because an error dime from 1987 can turn an ordinary coin into a valuable piece of numismatic evidence. And then there are the proof dimes struck at the San Francisco Mint in 1987. Never meant to jingle in pockets. These coins were carefully prepared, polished dies, specially treated planchets, multiple strikes to bring out sharp detail and mirror-like fields. These proof dimes were sold to collectors as part of annual proof sets sealed away. As the world outside changed dramatically, while circulating dimes felt the wear of daily life, proof dimes froze 1987 in perfect clarity, offering a contrast between ideal and reality, both equally important to understanding. The year grading plays a crucial role in separating the many from the few. Most 1987 dimes are worth face value because they circulated heavily, but high-grade examples, especially those preserved in mint state with full torch detail, bright luster, and no contact marks, tell a different story. These coins show what the dime looked like at birth before pockets and drawers and machines left their marks, and for collectors, these top-grade examples represent a challenge, a test of patience and knowledge, because finding a pristine 1987 dime decades later is far more difficult than it seems. Value is not only about rarity, but about survival, and survival is where this coin becomes truly fascinating. Consider what this dime lived through after leaving the mint. It may have been in circulation during the stock market crash of October 1987, passed across counters as fear spread, and then hope slowly returned. It may have been carried during the final years of the Cold War, when news of summits and treaties hinted at a changing world. It may have crossed borders, traveled in pockets of soldiers, students, workers, and travelers, each transfer adding invisible history. That no grading service can fully capture this dime was part of an economy transitioning toward digital systems, credit cards, electronic trading, and computerized banking. Yet it remained essential, because physical money still mattered, and even today, as digital payments dominate, the 1987 dime continues to circulate, reminding us that change does not erase the past, it builds on it. And this is why coins like this deserve attention. They are not rare in number, but rare in meaning. They connect policy and people, industry and daily life power and simplicity. And as we continue this journey, we will explore collector demand, market trends, famous discoveries, and how to evaluate a 1987 dime with your own eyes, because knowledge is the real value, and once you understand what to look for, you will never see spare change the same way again. Stay with Coins Us, because the story of this dime is far from over, where ordinary pocket change turns into extraordinary American history. And today, we are diving deep into one of the most misunderstood and quietly powerful coins ever struck by the United States Mint. The 1974 Roosevelt Dime, a coin so common that millions overlook it every day, and yet so rich in history, politics, metal science, minting drama, and cultural meaning that you could talk about it for hours without ever repeating yourself. This is not just a 10-cent coin. This is a time capsule from the heart of 1970s America, an era of economic pressure, oil crises, changing money metals, and a nation redefining what its currency really stood for. So settle in, because by the time this story ends, you will never look at a dime the same way again. The 1974 Roosevelt Dime was born in a turbulent decade. America was still feeling the aftershocks of the 1960s social change. The Vietnam War was winding down, inflation was rising, and for the first time in generations, Americans were realizing that the metal in their money mattered just as much as the face value before 1965. Dimes were made of real silver, and people saved them, trusted them, and even hoarded them. But by 1974, silver was gone, replaced by a copper nickel-clad composition that marked a permanent shift in U.S. coinage policy. And the 1974 dime stands right in the middle of that transformation, carrying the weight of lost silver traditions and the new reality of modern money. The design itself tells a story on the obverse. You see Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a president chosen for the dime, not because of wealth or power, but because of resilience and recovery. Roosevelt was the face of hope during the Great Depression and the founder of the March of Dimes, a campaign that literally fought disease with small change. And by 1974, his portrait had already become one of the most recognizable images in American coinage, symbolizing strength through hardship, a message that felt especially relevant during the economic uncertainty of the 1970s. The reverse shows the torch flanked by olive and oak branches, a powerful trio representing liberty, peace, and strength. And in 1974, these symbols quietly echoed the national mood, a desire for stability, peace after conflict, and the strength to endure economic strain. The 1974 dime was struck at three mints: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, with Philadelphia and Denver producing massive numbers intended for daily commerce, while San Francisco focused on proof coins made specifically for collectors. These proof dimes were struck with special dies, polished planchets, and greater pressure, creating mirror-like fields and frosted details that elevated a simple dime into a miniature work of art. The total mintage numbers reached into the hundreds of millions, making the coin common in quantity, but not common in significance, because abundance does not erase importance. It defines it. This dime jingled in pockets during gas lines, grocery price hikes, and a changing American economy. It paid for newspapers, phone calls, vending machines, and coffee counters. It was part of everyday survival, and that is where its real value lives. From a technical perspective, the 1974 dime reflects precision and mass production at its peak, measuring 17.91 millimeters in diameter, weighing 2.27 grams, and composed of a pure copper core, sandwiched between layers of copper nickel, giving it durability and a silvery appearance without intrinsic precious metal value. And yet errors and varieties exist: doubling off center strikes, clipped planchets, and die cracks that turn an ordinary coin into a collector's prize. Some rare error examples have sold for hundreds or even thousands, proving that history rewards those who pay attention. Condition also matters. A circulated 1974 dime may be worth face value, but in uncirculated mint state or proof condition, its value climbs, especially when preserved with full torch bands, a detail collectors obsess over because it represents sharp strikes and superior quality. Every tiny line, every band on that torch tells a story of pressure, alignment, and craftsmanship at the moment of striking, and that moment is frozen forever in metal. What makes the 1974 dime truly fascinating is not just what it is, but what it represents: a society adjusting to new monetary realities, the end of silver coinage, the rise of clad money, and the psychological shift from intrinsic value to trust-based currency. This dime is a lesson in economics, politics, metallurgy, and culture wrapped into 10 cents. And when you hold one, you are holding a piece of that transition, a silent witness to the decade that changed money forever. So the next time you hear a dime hit the table, remember, it is not small, it is not simple, and it is not meaningless. It is a survivor from 1974 carrying the voice of an era. And here on Coins, we uncover those voices, one coin at a time. Deeper into the story of the 1974 Roosevelt Dime, we move beyond the surface and into the living journey of this coin through American hands, streets, businesses, and history. Because coins do not just come from the mint. They travel, they age, they absorb the fingerprints of a nation, and the 1974 dime traveled through one of the most defining decades in modern America. This coin passed through the wallets of factory workers, students, soldiers, returning home shop owners, and families trying to stretch every dollar during rising inflation. Every dime mattered, and that reality gives this coin a human weight that collectors sometimes forget. The year 1974 itself was a crossroads moment. Gasoline prices were high, trust in government was fragile after Watergate, and the American dream was being re-examined, and right in the middle of that social reset, the Roosevelt dime kept circulating unchanged, steady, reliable, and familiar, reminding people that some symbols endure even when times are uncertain. The U.S. Mint intentionally kept the dime's design stable because consistency builds confidence, and confidence is the foundation of currency. And that is why the 1974 dime looks calm and dignified, even when the world around it was anything but calm. Behind the scenes, the mint was operating at industrial scale, striking millions of dimes daily using hardened steel, dies that wore down faster than many realize, and as dies aged, they created subtle variations, die cracks, die chips, and weak strikes that today act like fingerprints for numismatists who study these coins closely. Each variation tells us about the speed, pressure, and urgency of production, and in 1974, urgency was real. The economy demanded coins for commerce, and the mint delivered quantity without sacrificing national. Demanded coins for commerce, and the mint delivered quantity without sacrificing national symbolism. And that balance between speed and symbolism is one of the great untold stories of modern coinage collectors. Today, search rolls and collections for 1974 dimes with strong strikes, full torch details, and pristine surfaces, because perfection in a mass-produced object is rare, and when found, it represents a perfect alignment of metal. Machine and moment-proof dimes from San Francisco offer another layer of fascination, struck not for spending, but for preservation. They were sealed away in sets reflecting a growing collector culture during the 1970s, when Americans began to see coins not just as money, but as historical artifacts and investments, and these proof dimes captured the design in its purest form. Deep mirrors, sharp frost, and intentional beauty, contrasting with the hard-worn dimes that, as money, but as historical artifacts and investments, and these proof dimes captured the design in its purest form, deep mirrors, sharp frost, and intentional beauty, contrasting with the hard-worn dimes that lived in circulation. Both versions are equally important because together they tell the full story of use and preservation economics and memory. The 1974 dime also stands as a teaching tool for new collectors. It is accessible, affordable, and rich in study, potential making it a gateway coin that introduces people to grading mint marks, error hunting, and the deeper philosophy of numismatics, which is not about wealth but about connection to history. This dime invites questions. Why was silver removed? How does inflation change money? Why do designs stay the same? And what gives value to something so small? And those questions lead to bigger understanding, not just of coins, but of society itself. And that is why the 1974 dime deserves hours of discussion, because every angle opens a new door. The metallurgical shift represented by this coin changed how Americans viewed their currency. Some older generations mistrusted clad coins, feeling the loss of silver, while younger generations accepted them as normal. And the 1974 dime sits right between those mindsets, bridging tradition and modernity. It is a quiet compromise struck in metal, and that compromise worked, because here we are, decades later, still using the same dime design, still trusting its value, and still finding meaning in its story. So when you hold a 1974 dime, you are not holding spare change. You are holding continuity, endurance, and adaptation. You are holding a lesson in how a nation evolves without losing its identity, and that is the power of this small coin. And this is why on Coins Us, we never rush a story, because history, like metal, needs time, pressure, and patience to reveal its true shape.